The moon hung heavy in the night sky, casting a pale glow over the dense forest hidden beneath the layers of branches and leaves a shimmering vessel. Hummed softly, it wasn't a plane or a satellite, it was a ship alien in design, smooth as liquid silver from within. Princess Vera of the Alluri stepped out onto Earth's soil for the first time. She wore a cloak that rippled like silk over her violet-toned skin, her long white hair trailing behind her like threads of stardust. Her golden eyes shimmered with an ethereal glow filled with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. She was here for one purpose, diplomacy, yet Earth felt intoxicatingly unfamiliar. The air carried scents far into her home planet, and the warmth of the night settled on her skin like a tender caress. She inhaled deeply, her heart racing with a strange thrill. Earth's people were primitive compared to her kind, but there was beauty in their simplicity, beauty she wanted to see up close. Miles beneath the stars, a human named Ethan wandered through the forest. He was a wanderer by nature, someone who found solace in nature's silence. Standing at 6 feet, with a lean build, his sun-kissed skin hinted at hours spent outdoors. His tousled dark hair curled at the ends, and his green eyes scanned the path ahead with curiosity. Tonight something felt different, a hum in the air, an unease he couldn't quite place. He hadn't planned on staying out late, but something compelled him to keep walking. Perhaps it was the weight of the recent breakup with his girlfriend, or maybe it was his restlessness, a need to escape his own thoughts. He trudged deeper into the forest until a soft golden light flickered ahead. When Ethan stepped into the clearing, his breath caught in his throat. There she was, otherworldly and breathtaking. The moonlight bed her figure in silver, accentuating every elegant curve of her life form. Her golden gaze locked onto his, and in that moment Ethan felt like the air had been stolen from his lungs. Vera's heart raced. This human, this stranger, had stumbled upon her landing sight, but instead of fear there was in his eyes. She tilted her head, studying him the way a scientist might examine a curious specimen. He wore simple clothing, a dark jacket over a t-shirt, jeans slightly frayed at the edges, but his presence radiated warmth, something that felt different, comforting almost. "You're not afraid," she murmured in perfect English, her voice lilting like a song carried on the wind. Ethan blinked. "Should I be?" She smiled, a slow, deliberate gesture that sent a shiver down his spine. "Perhaps, but I mean you no harm." He took a tentative step closer, as if drawn to her by some unseen force. What are you?" They had debated whether to reveal the truth, but something about this human, about the way he looked at her, with both wonder and acceptance, made her want to answer honestly. "I am Vera, Princess Ofori." Ethan's breath hitched. "A princess from another planet?" "Yes." She watched him closely, gauging his reaction. Would he run? Would he scream? But instead Ethan let out a soft laugh, more incredulous than mocking. "Well, that's not the weirdest thing that's happened to me this week." Her lips twitched in amusement. This human was strange but fascinating, more fascinating than any Earth broadcast she had studied before her arrival, and something about his presence stirred something within her, a feeling she hadn't anticipated. The first touch was an accident. Thea reached out, brushing her hand against Ethan's forearm, curious about the texture of his skin. The sensation sent her jolt through both of them. Her touch was cool and soft, like the surface of a smooth river stone, and yet it ignited a warmth deep inside Ethan's chest. His heart thudded in response. "You feel different," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship behind her. "So do you," Ethan replied, his voice husky. There was something magnetic between them, something neither of them fully understood but couldn't resist. Vera felt her pulse quicken. This human's presence was awakening emotions she had never encountered on her planet. Relationships were strategic and passionless, but here, standing under the night sky with Ethan's curious eyes locked onto hers, everything felt raw, intense, and dangerously thrilling. She leaned closer, her golden eyes flickering with an emotion she couldn't name. Ethan's breath hitched as her scent enveloped him, soft, floral yet entirely alien. He wasn't sure if it was curiosity traction or something more profound, but he knew one thing he didn't want to leave in Vera. For the first time in her life, she didn't want to return to the cold halls of her royal station. Not yet, not when Earth and this human felt so intoxicatingly alive as the night deepened. They spoke in low tones, exchanging questions and stories, some personal, some trivial. Vera marveled at Ethan's honesty, how effortlessly he shared his thoughts without calculation or pretense, and Ethan in turn found himself captivated by her grace, her intelligence, and the quiet sadness that lingered behind her smiles. "I didn't expect this," Ethan admitted, his voice tinged with wonder as he gazed at her. "I didn't expect you." Vera's gaze softened. "Neither did I, human." She knew the rules. She knew she should have kept her distance, but Vera had always been a little reckless, a little too curious for her own good, and now standing so close to Ethan that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, she knew there was no going back. It began with a kiss. Soft, hesitant, and electric, their lips brushed, testing the waters, and then deepened into something more urgent, more consuming. Vera's hand slipped to the back of Ethan's neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. Ethan groaned softly, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. The kiss was more than just a kiss. It was an awakening for Vera. It was the first time she had ever felt such intensity, such desire, and for Ethan, it was like diving head first into the unknown, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, their hearts pounding in unison. The air between them crackled with unspoken promises and dangerous possibilities. "I shouldn't," Vera whispered, her voice shaky. "This is forbidden. Do you care?" Ethan's voice was low, filled with a challenge and something more, a plea. Vera hesitated for only a moment before shaking her head. "No." As the night wore on, the lines between them blurred. What had begun as a chance encounter evolved into something far more dangerous, something neither of them could stop. They didn't know what the future held or how their worlds would collide, but in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was the here and now, their hearts beating as one under the canopy of stars. By the time the first light of dawn peeked over the horizon, Fy knew she was no longer the same. Something had shifted within her, a strange warm sensation blooming in the pit of her stomach, unlike anything she had ever felt before. And as Ethan drifted off to sleep beside her, his arm draped protectively over her waist, Vera knew that the consequences of this night would be more profound than either of them could imagine. The story, however, was only beginning. Vera's heart belonged to a human now, and soon something far more precious would begin to grow inside her, something that would change the fate of two worlds forever. And Vera, she welcomed it with open arms. The days after that night in the forest unfolded in a way neither Vant nor Ethan could have predicted. What had started as a stolen moment beneath the stars began to evolve into something neither of them was prepared for, but something they couldn't resist. They met often secretly in the forest, where their worlds first collided. With every meeting, their connection deepened like a river carving through stone, relentless and inevitable. Yet beneath their growing affection, a shadow loomed, a secret that Vera could feel stirring inside her. Vera reclined on the soft grass near Ethan's, sunlight threading through the canopy above them. His jacket was draped over her bare shoulders, and although Earth's sun was much warmer than the stars of her home world, it was not the heat outside that unnerved her, it was the heat within. Something had shifted deep inside her, a sensation that was alien even to a being as advanced as herself. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, frowning slightly as she felt a warmth spread beneath her skin. The Elay did not conceive easily, and never outside controlled environments, yet this warmth, this strange fluttering pulse inside her, hinted at the unthinkable. It was impossible, or at least it should have been. Ethan sat beside her, unaware of the storm brewing within her thoughts. He was speaking about something, stories from his childhood, maybe, but Vera could barely focus. The fluttering pulse persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. She knew what it meant. But she hadn't dared to say it aloud, not yet. You okay?" Ethan asked, his green eyes scanning her face with concern. Vera forced a smile, brushing his dark curls from his forehead. "Yes, I'm just tired," he smiled, though his expression was tinged with worry. "Maybe I should take you back to your ship, get you some rest." Her heart tightened at his suggestion. The thought of leaving him even for a moment felt unbearable. "Now no," she whispered, her hand slipping into his. "Not yet." Ethan gave her fingers a gentle squeeze, his gaze softening. He didn't press her for answers, not yet, but the questions lingered in his eyes just beneath the surface, and Vera knew she couldn't keep her secret much longer. Later that night, Ethan lay awake listening to the rhythmic hum of insects in the forest. Beyond the open window, Vera slept beside him, her breathing slow, and even her hand resting on his chest. She looked peaceful, but there was an edge to her slumber, a tension in her brow that hadn't been there before, so something was bothering her, and Ethan could feel it. He stared at the ceiling, his mind churning. He hadn't planned for this, whatever this was. When he kissed her that night in the forest, he hadn't thought beyond the moment. He hadn't imagined that an alien princess would become such a part of his life, wrapping herself around his heart like ivy. But now, with every passing day, he felt the weight of what they were doing, of what it could mean. What if someone found out? What if she was taken from him? Or worse, what if he was taken? Governments didn't handle aliens with kindness. They would dissect Vera, keep her locked in some underground lab. The thought made his stomach twist. And then there were other questions he hadn't dared ask her yet. What would happen if she left? Would she return to her world and leave him behind, just a forgotten human memory? Or had he already crossed a line they couldn't come back from? Ethan glanced at V's sleeping form, brushing a strand of her snowy hair from her cheek. The way she looked at him, the way she kissed him, it felt like forever. But forever was a dangerous thing to promise when two worlds stood between them, and deep down Ethan knew the truth. Something had already changed. He could feel it in the way she held him tighter than before, as if she was clinging to him, not just for comfort, but out of fear. Fear of what 2 nights later they sat on the forest floor, the stars above them mirrored in a still pond nearby. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words. Ethan could feel it coming, the moment when whatever was knowing that Vera would finally spill free. She stared into the water, her reflection rippling slightly as the wind brushed the surface. Then slowly she placed her hand over her abdomen, as if cradling something fragile. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Okay." Vera turned to face him, her golden eyes gleaming in the moonlight. There was fear in her gaze, but beneath it something else, a strange, desperate hope. She hesitated, her throat tightening. "I'm carrying your child, Ethan." The world seemed to stop. Ethan stared at her, stunned into silence, his mind reeled, trying to grasp the meaning of her words. "His child? That's not possible," he whispered, shaking his head. How Vera's expression was calm, but her hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. "I don't know how breeding with another species is impossible. Our genetics are too different. But somehow, with you it happened." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just unbelievable. It was terrifying. An alien child, his child. How could this even be real? He opened his mouth to speak, but Vera cut him off, her voice soft but urgent. "I know it's overwhelming, but this is real. Ethan, I can feel it growing inside me." She placed his hand over her stomach, and Ethan felt it, the strange warmth beneath her skin pulsing softly like a second heartbeat. It sent a shiver down his spine. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The forest around them was silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan's mind raced. How could they hide this? What would happen if anyone found out? He could already picture the chaos: scientists, military officials, news crews. Their lives would be torn apart, dissected under the harsh glare of the world's curiosity. But beyond the fear, there was something else, a strange, fierce protectiveness. This child, this impossible being, was part of him, and part of Va. He looked at her, his hands still resting on her abdomen, and saw the uncertainty in her eyes. She was scared, too scared of what the future held for them. "We figure this out," he whispered, squeezing her hand together. Vera exhaled relief, flooding her features in that moment. She knew she had made the right choice. Whatever dangers lay ahead, she wasn't facing them alone. But the path before them was dark and uncertain, and every choice they made would ripple across two worlds as they sat together beneath the stars, holding on to each other as if their lives depended on it. Bee felt the fluttering pulse in her belly grow stronger. A life born of two worlds, impossible yet real, and with it the first stirring of a new destiny, one they could no longer escape. The days stretched into weeks as Ethan and Vera tried to carve out a life within the impossible, but with every passing moment, the weight of their secret grew heavier. They moved cautiously, meeting in secluded places, whispering in the cover of night. Their love was a fragile thing, beautiful yet burdened with fear and uncertainty. But secrets don't stay buried for long, and soon the outside world began to press against their sanctuary, threatening to unravel everything. The first sign of danger came in the form of strangers asking questions. Ethan noticed them around town, men in black suits with cold, expressionless faces. They seemed out of place, their questions fake but persistent. A missing person, a strange light sighting in the woods, nothing Ethan couldn't shrug off, but enough to make his skin crawl. He knew what it was. They were looking for Via. One evening, Ethan found himself lingering too long outside the local diner, watching as one of the agents flashed a photograph to the waitress behind the counter. Ethan's pulse quickened when he saw the blurry image's face. He clenched his fists. They were closing in. He hurried back to the cabin they had been using as a hideout, a place deep in the forest away from prying eyes. When he stepped inside, Vera was waiting for him, her golden eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "What's wrong?" she asked, sensing his tension. Immediately they hear, Ethan said, breathless. "They looking for you." Vera's jaw tightened, her hand reflexively going to her stomach, which had begun to show the slightest curve, a soft, barely visible swell. Their child was growing quickly, for faster than any human baby. "Would we need to leave?" Ethan said, grabbing the duffel bag from the corner of the room. Now Vera hesitated for a moment, her gaze lingering on him. They had been running since the beginning, hiding in the shadows, and with every step, the walls of the world seemed to close in on them. But now she wasn't just running for herself, she was running for their child. They packed what little they had and flew deeper into the forest, following a path that only Ethan knew. The trees stretched endlessly around them, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Under the moonlight, every step felt like a countdown, each moment stolen from the forces closing in on them. Ethan led the way, glancing over his shoulder every few minutes to make sure Vera was keeping up. She moved silently, her alien grace making her seem almost weightless, but there was a heaviness in her now, both physical and emotional. After hours of walking, they reached an abandoned hunting cabin. The roof sagged in places, and the windows were cracked, but it would offer shelter for the night. Ethan helped Vera inside, where she sank onto the worn-out mattress, exhaustion etched into her face. "You need to rest," Ethan whispered, brushing a hand along her cheek. He could see the strain in her. Carrying their child seemed to drain her energy faster with each day. Vera caught his hand before he could pull away. Her eyes searching his. "We can't keep running, Ethan." He crouched beside her, taking her hands in his. He could feel the weight of her words, the exhaustion, the fear, the uncertainty. She was right. Running could only buy them so much time. "We'll figure something out," he promised, though even as the words left his mouth, they felt hollow. Vera smiled, a small, bittersweet smile that made Ethan's heart ache. "I know," she whispered, "but whatever happens, we have to protect this child." No matter what. That night, Ethan slept fitfully, haunted by strange dreams. He saw the child, small, with pale skin like starlight and eyes that burned golden like Vea's. In the dream, the child reached for him, but something dark loomed behind it, a shadow that twisted and hungry and relentless. Ethan tried to run, to pull the child away from the darkness, but his legs felt heavy, as if he were wading through thick mud, the shadow surged forward, swallowing everything in its path, trees, stars, even time itself. Ethan woke with a start, his heart hammering in his chest. The room was dark, the air thick with silence. Beside him, Vera stirred, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "It's coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness. Ethan turned toward her, his throat dry. "What's coming?" Vera's golden eyes met his, filled with a sorrow he couldn't fully understand. "They'll find us sooner than we can." The next morning, Ethan made a decision. They couldn't keep running, not with the agents closing in and not with Farah growing weaker each day. If they were going to survive, they needed help. He knew of one person, an old friend, who might be able to provide them with a way out. Marcus had connections underground, routes used to smuggle people across borders without a trace. If anyone could help them disappear, it was him. "We'll go to Marcus," Ethan told Vera as they packed their things. "He'll get us out of here." Vera nodded, though Ethan could see the doubt flickering in her eyes. Every step forward felt like walking into the unknown. They set out at dawn, the forest shrouded in mist. The air was cool and damp, and the scent of pine lingered in the breeze. Vera walked beside Ethan, her hand occasionally brushing against his, as if seeking reassurance. But as they approached the edge of the forest, Ethan's got twisted. With her knees, the forest was too quiet. And then he saw it, the faint glimpse of something metallic between the trees. Ethan, Vera's voice was sharp with alarm. He turned just in time to see them, the agents emerging from the mist like phantoms. There were at least 6 of them, dressed in black, their eyes cold and calculating. "Run!" Ethan shouted, grabbing Vunk hand. They sprinted through the trees, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor. But the agents were fast, too fast. Ethan could hear their boots crunching on the undergrowth, getting closer with every step. Vera stumbled, her breath ragged. The weight of her pregnancy was slowing her down. Ethan caught her before she could fall, his heart racing. "Go!" Vera gasped, pushing him away. "You have to. I'm not leaving you." Ethan snarled, pulling her to her feet. They ran together, fear driving them forward, but the agents were relentless. The chase was coming to an end. They burst through the trees and into a clearing, only to find themselves surrounded. Ethan spun around, pulling Vera behind him as the agents closed in, their weapons drawn. His mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was none. One of the agents stepped forward, his expression cold and detached. "You shouldn't have run." Ethan clenched his fists, his body tense with rage. He wouldn't let them take her, not without a fight. Vera's hand tightened around his arm, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We'll protect our child," she whispered. No matter what. The agents moved closer, their shadows stretching long across the ground. Ethan and Vera stood together, united in love and defiance. But as the net closed around them, Ethan knew the hardest fight was yet to come. The forest fell silent as the circle of agents tightened around Ethan and Vera, their weapons gleaming under the pale morning light. Ethan's heart pounded with a frantic rhythm. There was no way out, no escape. His fingers flexed at his side, desperate for a weapon, anything to fight back. But all he had was his resolve and Vera. And then the unthinkable happened. Vera doubled over, clutching her stomach, her breath hitched, her face pale with pain. It was happening. The child was coming. The realization hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. The timing couldn't have been worse. Vera's voice was strained but urgent. "Ethan, it's too soon." Her knees buckled and Ethan caught her before she fell, cradling her trembling form. "You hold on, okay? Just hold on. We're going to get out of this." The agents halted, watching with cold curiosity. Their leader, the same man who had spoken before, took a step forward. "It's already begun," he murmured, his voice devoid of emotion. "What the hell are you talking about?" Ethan demanded, his voice roar with desperation. The agent's gaze flickered to Vera's stomach, where the subtle glow of alien energy pulsed beneath her skin. "We're not just here to capture her. We're here to contain what's inside her." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You knew?" The agent gave a small detached smile. "We've known since the moment she landed, and now it's time to take back control." Pain wrecked Vera's body as she collapsed to the ground, her breathing shallow and rapid golden light swirled around her, flickering like flames as her alien physiology responded to the strain of labor. Ethan knelt beside her, she holding her from the agents who advanced with eerie calm. And then the ground trembled. Loam, almost imperceptible, at first began to rise from Vera's body. The air grew heavy with static electricity. The hairs on Ethan's arms standing on end. Stay with me, Vera, Ethan whispered, brushing sweat damp hair from her forehead. He was helpless, powerless to stop what was happening, but he would stay. He would fight. The glow around they bright and blinding now until Ethan had to squeeze wind just to keep his eyes on her. The agents paused, unsettled for the first time, and then in a burst of energy that rippled through the air, the child was born. The child's first cry wasn't a sound, but a wave, a pulse of energy that rippled through the clearing, sending the agent stumbling backward. Ethan gasped as he looked down at the tiny being cradled in V's trembling arms. The child was unlike anything he had ever seen, small and delicate, yet radiating a power that seemed to defy understanding. Its skin shimmered with an otherworldly sheen, and its golden eyes opened, locking onto Ethan's with a depth far beyond its newborn appearance. Ethan felt something stir deep within him, a connection immediate and undeniable. This was their child, a perfect fusion of two worlds. But the agents weren't done. The leader raised his hand, signaling his men to move, and we cannot allow it to live. It's too dangerous. Ethan's body moved before his mind could catch up. He stood between the agents and his family, his hands raised, fury burning in his chest. You're not touching them. Step aside, the agent ordered, his tone like ice. The child is a threat to both your world and hers. Ethan shook his head, defiant. This child is the future. I don't care what you think. You're not taking my family. Vera, still weak from the birth, shifted behind Ethan, her glowing eyes filled with sorrow and determination. She knew what had to be done. The child couldn't survive here, not with these people hunting it. She placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder, her touch feather light. There's a way, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I'll need to leave. Ethan turned to her, panic flashing in his eyes. What do you mean, leave? Vera's gaze was steady, though tears brimmed at the edges. If I take the child back to my world, it will be safe. But I can't come back, Ethan, not ever. Ethan's heart shattered. No, there to be another way. There isn't, she said gently. Her hand drifted to his cheek, memorizing the feel of him, knowing this would be the last time. We were never meant to last, but what we've made, it will live on. Ethan shook his head, tears burning his eyes. I can't let you go. You have to, Vera whispered, pressing her forehead against his. For them, the agents advanced, again, their patience running thin. Vera didn't wait. She clutched the child tightly to her chest, summoning the last of her energy. Golden light flared around her once more, but this time it was different, more controlled, more deliberate. She was opening a portal, a shimmering rift between worlds. Vera, no, Ethan cried, grabbing her arm. The portal flickered, unstable, but it was the only chance they had. Vera kissed him, one last, lingering kiss that carried all the love they couldn't put into words, and then she stepped back, cradling their child close. I'll always love you, she whispered, and with a final heart-wrenching smile, she stepped into the portal. The rift snapped shut with a blinding flash of light, leaving Ethan alone in the clearing. The agents lowered their weapons, stunned into silence. The woman and child were gone beyond their reach. Now the leader gave Ethan a cold, assessing look before turning to leave. There was nothing left for them here. Ethan stood there for a long time, the forest around him eerily quiet, his heart ach with a grief too deep for words. Vera was gone, their child was gone, but even in the midst of his sorrow, Ethan knew something profound had happened. He had loved truly deeply, and that love had created something extraordinary. As the sun rose over the forest, Ethan stood tall, his heart heavy, but his soul at peace. Somewhere in another world his child was safe, and maybe, just maybe, they would meet again, in a place beyond stars and shadows.